Hey, hey, it's story time with Dottie. That was a really fun song. It's like really getting into it. Like to play a little song so I can share my stream all around, whatnot. But what's happening, lovely people? Thank you for being here. Looks like we got... Well, Zulu One said that he was here, but he might be sleeping. The possibility is always real. Sue Finelli, hello. Kirk Wilson, hello to everyone. And we'll see who else maybe shows up. I think we had like 10 people in here last time, so that was pretty nice. It's always nice to have friends here with me. So we're continuing The Horse and His Boy in the Chronicles of Narnia series. And as always, if you want to start from the beginning, start at the Magician's Nephew, go on to the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Now we're on The Horse and His Boy. And if you want to send me a letter or seeds or silver or anything you want, P.O. Box 1598, Shelton, Washington, 98584. And yeah, let's get right into it. We are on Chapter 5, Prince Corin. My dear sister and very good lady, said King Edmund, you must now show your courage, for I tell you plainly we are in no small danger. Walter Williams, hello. What is it, Edmund? Asked the Queen. It is this, said Edmund. I do not think we shall find it easy to leave Tashbaan. While the prince had hoped that you would take him, we were honored guests. But by the lion's mane, I think that as soon as he has your flat denial, we shall be no better than prisoners. One of the dwarfs gave a low whistle. I warned your majesties. I warned you, said Salopad the raven. Easily in, but not easily out, as the lobster said in the lobster pot. I have been with the prince this morning, continued Edmund. He is little used, more's the pity, to have his will crossed, and he is very chafed at your long delays and doubtful answers. This morning he pressed very hard to know your mind. I put it aside, meaning at the same time to diminish his hopes with some light common jests about women's fancies, and hinted that his suit was likely to be cold. He grew angry and dangerous. There was a sort of threatening, though still veiled under a show of courtesy, in every word he spoke. Doc Michael, hello, hello. You only missed like 2 minutes. You can rewind and then go to like double speed, and then you'll be caught up in no time. It's all good. Yes, said Tumnus, and when I supped with him, when I supped with the Grand Vizier last night, it was the same. He asked me how I liked Tashbaan, and for I could not tell him I hated every stone of it, and would not lie, told him that now, when high summer was coming on, my heart turned to the cool woods and dewy slopes of Narnia. He gave a smile that meant no good, and said, There is nothing to hinder you from dancing there again, little goatfoot, always provided you leave us in exchange a bride for our prince. Eric Dulion, hello. Yeah, we're not going back to the beginning. It's up to you to get caught up to speed. There is no redos in this. Do you mean he would make me his wife by force? Exclaimed Susan. That's my fear, Susan, said Edmund. Wife or slave, which is worse? But how can he? Does the Tisroc think our brother, the High King, would suffer such an outrage? Sire, said Peredan to the king, they would not be so mad. Do they think there are no swords and spears in Narnia? Alas, said Edmund, my guess is that the Tisroc has very small fear of Narnia. We are a little land, and little lands on the borders of a great empire were always hateful to the lords of the great empire. He longs to blot them out, gobble them up, and when first he suffered the prince to come to Cair Paravel as your lover's sister, it may be that he was only seeking an occasion against us. Most likely, he hopes to make one mouthful of Narnia and Archenland both. Yeah, like in the caveman days, you hit the woman over their head and there you're your wife. Yeah, that's how it's done. You bag her and wet her. Let him try, said the second dwarf. At sea, we are as big as he is, and if he assaults us by land, he has the desert to cross. True, friend, said Edmund, but is the desert a sure defense? What does Salopad say? I know the desert well, said the raven, for I have flown above it far and wide in my younger days. You may be sure that Shasta pricked up his ears at this point. And this is certain, that if the Tisroc goes by the great oasis, he can never lead a great army across it into Archenland. For though they could reach the oasis by the end of their first day's march, yet the springs there would be too little for the thirst of all those soldiers and their beasts. But there is another way. Hitting them over the head was the way you divorced them too. Yeah. I mean, you hit them to start it and hit them to end it. Just bookend the deal. Shasta listened more attentively still. He that would find that way, said the raven, must start from the tombs of the ancient kings and ride northwest, so that the double peak of Mount Pyre is always straight ahead of him. And so, in a day's riding or a little more, he shall come to the head of a stony valley, which is so narrow that a man might be within a furlong of it 1,000 times and never know that it was there. And looking down this valley, he will see neither grass nor water nor anything else good. But if he rides on down it, he will come to a river and can ride by the water all the way into Archenland. And do the Calormenes know of this western way? Asked the queen. Friends, friends, said Edmund, what is the use of all this discourse? We are not asking whether Narnia or Calormen would win if war arose between them. We are asking how to save the honor of the queen and our own lives out of this devilish city. For though my brother Peter the High King defeated the Tisroc a dozen times over, yet long before that day our throats would be cut and the queen's grace would be the wife, or more likely the slave, of this prince. Young Love 4020, hello, hello. This is Queen Susan. So this is when Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy are all still in Narnia. They haven't left the wardrobe yet, but this is a different story that's happening while they are kings and queens. So Queen Susan is the queen that they're talking about here. We have our weapons, king, said the first dwarf, and this is a reasonably defensible house. As to that, said the king, I do not doubt that every one of us would sell our lives dearly in the gate, and they would not come at the queen over our dead bodies. Yet we should be merely rats fighting in a trap when all's said. Start of a new day. Thank you for the bedtime story, Lady Dottie. Much love, folks. You are most welcome for the bedtime story. I'm glad you enjoy. Very true, croaked the raven. These last stands in a house make good stories, but nothing ever came of them. After their first repulses, the enemy always sets the house on fire. I am the cause of all this, said Susan, bursting into tears. Oh, if only I had never left Cair Paravel. Our last happy day was before those ambassadors came from Calormen. The moles were planting an orchard for us. Oh, oh, and she buried her face in her hands and sobbed. Courage, Sue, courage, said Edmund. Remember, but what is the matter with you, Master Tumnus? For the fawn was holding both his horns with his hands as if he were trying to keep his head on by them and writhing to and fro as if he had a pain in his inside. Don't speak to me, said Tumnus. I'm thinking so that I can hardly breathe. Wait, do wait. There was a moment's puzzled silence, and then the fawn looked up, drew a long breath, mopped its forehead, and said, The only difficulty is how to get down to our ship, with some stores, too, without being seen, and stopped. Yes, said a dwarf dryly, just as the beggar's only difficulty about riding is that he has no horse. Wait, said Mr. Tumnus impatiently. All we need is some pretext for going down to our ship today and taking stuff on board. Yes, said King Edmund doubtfully. Spicy Sarah, hello. Well then, said the fawn, how would it be if your majesties bade the prince to a great banquet to be held on board our own galleon, the Splendor Hyaline, tomorrow night, and let the message be worded as graciously as the queen can contrive without pledging her honor, so as to give the prince a hope that she is weakening. This is a very good counsel, sire, croaked the raven. And then, continued Tumnus excitedly, everyone will expect us to be going down to the ship all day, making preparations for our guests. And let some of us go to the bazaars and spend every minimum we have at the fruitiers and the sweetmeat sellers and the wine merchants, just as we would if we were really giving a feast. And let us order magicians and jugglers and dancing girls and flute players all to be on board tomorrow night. I see, said King Edmund, rubbing his hands. And then, said Tumnus, we'll all be on board tonight, and as soon as it is quite dark, up sails and out oars, said the king. And so to sea, cried Tumnus, leaping up and beginning to dance. And our nose northward, said the first dwarf, running for home. Hurrah for Narnia and the north, said the other. And the prince, waking next morning and finding his birds flown, said Paradan, clapping his hands. Oh, Master Tumnus, dear Master Tumnus, said the queen, catching his hands and swinging with him as he danced, you have saved us all. The prince will chase us, said another lord, whose name Shasta had not heard. That's the least of my fears, said Edmund. I have seen all the shipping in the river, and there is no tall ship of war nor swift galley there. I wish he may chase us, for the Splendor Hyaline could sink anything he has to send after her, if we were overtaken at all. Sire, said the raven, you shall hear no better plot than the fawn's, though we sat in council for 7 days. And now, as we birds say, nests before eggs, which is as much to say, let us all take our food and then at once be about our business. Everyone arose at this, and the doors were opened, and the lords and creatures stood aside for the king and queen to go out first. Shasta wondered what he ought to do, but Mr. Tumnus said, lie there, your highness, and I will bring you up a little feast to yourself in a few moments. There is no need for you to move until we are all ready to embark. Shasta laid his head down again on the pillows, and soon he was alone in the room. This is perfectly dreadful, thought Shasta. It never came into his head to tell these Narnians the whole truth and ask for their help. Having been brought up by a hard, close-fisted man like Arshish, he had a fixed habit of never telling grown-ups anything if he could help it. He thought they would always spoil or stop whatever you were trying to do, and he thought that even if the Narnian king might be friendly to the 2 horses because they were talking beasts of Narnia, he would hate Erebus because she was a Calormene, and either sell her for a slave or send her back to her father. As for himself, I simply daren't tell them I'm not Prince Corin now, thought Shasta. I've heard all their plans. If they knew I wasn't one of themselves, they'd never let me out of this house alive. They'd be afraid I'd betray them to the Tisrock. They'd kill me. And if the real Corin turns up, it'll all come out, and they will. He had, you see, no idea of how noble and freeborn people behave. What am I to do? What am I to do? He kept saying to himself. Hello, here comes that goaty little creature again. The fawn trotted in, half dancing with a tray in its hands, which was nearly as large as itself. Then he set on an inlaid table beside Shasta's sofa, and sat down himself on the carpeted floor with his goaty legs crossed. Now, princeling, he said, make a good dinner. It will be your last meal in Tashbaan. It was a fine meal after the Calormene fashion. I don't know whether you would have liked it or not, but Shasta did. There were lobsters and salad and snipe stuffed with almonds and truffles, and a complicated dish made of chicken livers and rice and raisins and nuts, and there were cool melons and gooseberry fools and mulberry fools and every kind of nice thing that can be made with ice. There was also a little flagon of the sort of wine that is called white, though it is really yellow. Talking about meals makes me hungry. Yeah, I just learned to make fried zucchini, and it's like my new favorite thing right now. Dip it in flour and then egg and then panko and then cook it in the air fryer for 10 minutes. Whew, so good. Beyond amazing. Just so good. I ate so much of it. While Shasta was eating, the good little fawn, who thought he was still dazed with sunstroke, kept talking to him about the fine times he would have when they all got home, about his good old father, King Loon of Archenland, and the little castle where he lived on the southern slopes of the pass, And don't forget, said Mr. Tumnus, that you are promised your first suit of armor and your first war horse on your next birthday. And then your highness will begin to learn how to tilt and joust. And in a few years, if all goes well, King Peter has promised your royal father that he himself will make you knight at Cair Paravel. And in the meantime, there will be plenty of comings and goings between Narnia and Archenland across the neck of the mountains. And of course, you remember you have promised to come for a whole week to stay with me for the summer festival. And there'll be bonfires and all-night dances of fauns and dryads in the heart of the woods. And who knows, we might see Aslan himself. I don't want any of the chicken livers. Thank you anyway. Yeah, that didn't sound good in any way to me. Put a little butter in there also. Butter makes everything better. Everything is better with butter. When the meal was over, the fawn told Shasta to lay quietly where he was, and it wouldn't do you any harm to have a little sleep, he added. I'll call you in plenty of time to get on board, and then home, Narnia and the North. Shasta had so enjoyed his dinner and all the things Tumnus had been telling him that when he was left alone, his thoughts took a different turn. He only hoped now that the real Prince Corin would not turn up until it was too late and that he would be taken away to Narnia by ship. I'm afraid he did not think at all of what might happen to the real Corin when he was left behind in Tashbaan. He was a little worried about Aravis and Bree waiting for him at the tombs, but then he said to himself, well, how can I help it? And anyway, the Aravis thinks she's too good to go about with me, so she can jolly well go alone. And at the same time, he couldn't help feeling that it would be much nicer going to Narnia by sea than toiling across the desert. When he had thought all this, he did what I expect you would have done if you had been up very early and had a long walk and a great deal of excitement and then a very good meal and were lying on a sofa in a cool room with no noise in it except when a bee came buzzing in through the wide open windows. He fell asleep. What woke him was a loud crash. He jumped up off the sofa, staring. He saw at once from the mirror look of the room the lights and shadows all looked different, that he must have slept for several hours. He saw also what had made the crash. A costly porcelain vase, which had been standing on the windowsill, lay on the floor, broken into about 30 pieces. But he hardly noticed all these things. What he did notice was two hands gripping the windowsill from outside. They gripped harder and harder, getting white at the knuckles, and then up came a head and a pair of shoulders. A moment later, there was a boy of Shasta's own age sitting astride the sill with one leg hanging down inside the room. Shasta had never seen his own face in a looking-glass. Even if he had, he might not have realized that the other boy was, at ordinary times, almost exactly like himself. At the moment, this boy was not particularly like anyone, for he had the finest black eye you ever saw and a tooth missing. And his clothes, which must have been splendid ones when he put them on, were torn and dirty, and there was both blood and mud on his face. Who are you? Said the boy in a whisper. Are you Prince Corin? Asked Shasta. Yes, of course, said the other, but who are you? I'm nobody in particular, I mean, said Shasta. King Edmund caught me in the street and mistook me for you. I suppose we must look like one another. Can I get out the way you've got in? Yes, if you're any good at climbing, said Corin. But why are you in such a hurry? I say, we ought to be able to get some fun out of this being mistaken for one another. No, said Shasta, we must change places at once. It'll be simply frightful if Mr. Tumnus comes back and finds us both here. I've had to pretend to be you, and you're starting tonight secretly. And where were you all this time? A boy in the street made a beastly joke about Queen Susan, said Prince Corin, so I knocked him down. He ran howling into a house and his big brother came out, so I knocked the big brother down too. Then they all followed me until we ran into 3 old men with spears who are called the Watch. So I fought the Watch and they knocked me down. It was getting dark by now. Then the Watch took me along to lock me up somewhere. So I asked them if they'd like a stoup of wine, and they said they didn't mind if they did. Then I took them to a wine shop and got them some, and they all sat down and drank till they fell asleep. Hey, Barbara-Zina. I thought it was time for me to be off, so I came out quietly, and then I found the first boy, the one who had started all the trouble, still hanging about. So I knocked him down again. After that, I climbed up a pipe onto the roof of a house and lay quite still and lay quiet till it began to get light this morning. Ever since that, I've been finding my way back. I say, is there anything to drink? Thank you. They're pretty cool earrings. My ears are gauged, and so I couldn't wear dangly earrings for a long time, but I would just like put them through my have like rubber eyelets, and so I'd put dangly earrings through those. And then I found that they make gauge styles that are dangly, so I got a bunch of them. Yes, why wouldn't I? No, I drank it, said Shasta. And now, show me how you got in. There's not a minute to lose. You'd better lie down on the sofa and pretend, but I forgot. It'll be no good with all those bruises and black eye. You'll just have to tell them the truth once I'm safely away. What else did you think I'd be telling them? Asked the prince with a rather angry look. And who are you? There's no time, said Shasta in a frantic whisper. I'm a Narnian, I believe, something northern anyway, but I've been brought up all my life in Kellerman, and I'm escaping across the desert with a talking horse called Bree. And now quick, how do I get away? Look, said Corin, drop from this window onto the roof of the veranda, but you must do it lightly on your toes or someone will hear you. Then along to your left and you can get up to the top of that wall. If you're any good at all as a climber, then along the wall to the corner. Drop onto the rubbish heap you will find outside, and there you are. Thanks, said Shasta, who was already sitting on the sill. The 2 boys were looking into each other's faces and suddenly found that they were friends. Goodbye, said Corin, and good luck. I do hope you get away safely. Goodbye, said Shasta. I say you have been having some adventures. Nothing to yours, said the prince. Now drop. Lightly, I say, he added as Shasta dropped. I hope we meet in Archenland. Go to my father, King Loon, and tell him you're a friend of mine. Look out, I hear someone coming. Where is my sign celebrating my big win on Monday? What's funny, I made a meme that I don't know, just made me laugh, but I do need to print out like a banner of it because I don't know if you can see it. It says, July 5th, 2021, the day Dottie's World won Trivial Night with Zulu 1 and Waters Above. The greatest honor I've probably ever had. So, yeah, very, very proud of that. I won on Monday. There was a conspiracy against me. I got 3.5 points and they only gave me 1 answer right. I'm the greatest. Yeah, well, I got 7.5 points. So even if they had awarded your points correctly, I still cleaned house and won. So I feel very, very proud of that. That was seriously just like the best moment ever. Chapter 6, Shasta Among the Tombs. Shasta ran lightly along the roof on tiptoes. It felt hot to his bare feet. He was only a few seconds scrambling up the wall at the far end, and when he got to the corner, he found himself looking down into a narrow, smelly street, and there was a rubbish heap against the outside of the wall, just as Corin had told him. Before jumping down, he took a rapid glance round him to get his bearings. Apparently, he had now come over the crown of the island hill on which Tashbaan is built. Everything sloped away before him. Flat roofs below, flat roofs down to the towers and battlements of the city's northern wall. Beyond that was the river, and beyond the river a short slope covered with gardens. But beyond that again there was something he had never seen the like of. A great yellowish-gray thing, flat as a calm sea, and stretching for miles. On the far side of it were huge blue things, lumpy, but with jagged edges, and some of them with white tops. The desert! The mountains, thought Shasta. He jumped down onto the rubbish and began trotting along downhill as fast as he could in the narrow lane, which soon brought him into a wider street where there were more people. No one bothered to look at a little ragged boy running along on bare feet. Still, he was anxious and uneasy till he turned a corner and there saw the city gate in front of him. Here he was pressed and jostled a bit, for a good many other people were also going out, and on the bridge beyond the gate the crowd became quite a slow procession, more like a queue than a crowd. Out there, with clear running water on each side, it was deliciously fresh after the smell and heat and noise of Tashbaan. Whoever has the quickest internet wins that game. Yes, I normally play on my phone, and this was the first time that I played on my computer, and so after they would answer a question, I would immediately hit the 1.5 speed just to make sure that it was super caught up for the next question. And then, yeah, I mean, I just happened to get lucky on a couple of them. One was a complete guess, and I guessed right. And then another one, I answered before they even finished asking the question, and that was correct. And yeah, I got very, very lucky on that. But yeah, being on your computer and hitting that speed forward after the questions, that's where it's at. So when once Shasta had reached the far end of the bridge, he found the crowd melting away. Everyone seemed to be going either to the left or right along the riverbank. He went straight ahead up a road that did not appear to be much used, between gardens. In a few places he was alone, and in a few paces he was alone, and a few more brought him to the top of the slope. There he stood and stared. It was like coming to the end of the world, for all the grass stopped quite suddenly a few feet before him, and the sand began. Endless level sand, like on a seashore, but a bit rougher because it was never wet. The mountains, which now looked farther off than before, loomed ahead. Greatly to his relief, he saw about 5 minutes' walk away on his left what must certainly be the tombs, just as Bree had described them. Great masses of moldering stone shaped like gigantic beehives, but a little narrower. They looked very black and grim, for the sun was now setting right behind them. Look at that smile. She's so proud. I love it. Yeah, like you have no idea. Winning trivia night was literally like the greatest joy, because normally I am sitting strong at 0.5 points, possibly 1.5. But to clean house with 7.5, win the game, I mean, just crushed it. He turned his face west and trotted toward the tombs. He could not help looking out very hard for any sign of his friends, though the setting sun shone in his face so that he could hardly see anything. And anyway, he thought, of course they'll be round on the far side of the farthest tomb, not this side where anyone might see them from the city. There were about 12 tombs, each with a low arched doorway that opened into absolute blackness. They were dotted about in no kind of order, so that it took a long time going round this one and going round that one before you could be sure you had looked round every side of every tomb. This was what Shasta had to do. There was nobody there. It was very quiet here out on the edge of the desert, and now the sun had really set. Just make up nonsense answers for questions that aren't even asked. I don't care. Yeah, if I have absolutely zero clue of the answer and not even kind of a guess, all about the nonsense answers. At that point, then I just try to be funny and hope that I am. So. Suddenly, from somewhere behind him, there came a terrible sound. Shasta's heart gave a great jump, and he had to bite his tongue to keep himself from screaming. Next moment, he realized what it was, the horns of Tashban blowing for the closing of the gates. "Don't be a silly little coward," said Shasta to himself. "Why, it's only the same noise you heard this morning." But there is a great difference between a noise heard letting you in with your friends in the morning and a noise heard alone at nightfall shutting you out. And now that the gates were shut, he knew that there was no chance of the others joining him that evening. Either they're shut up in Tashban for the night, thought Shasta, or else they've gone on without me. It's just the sort of thing that Erebus would do, but Bree wouldn't. Oh, he wouldn't now, would he? In this idea about Erebus, Shasta was once more quite wrong. She was proud and could be hard enough, but she was as true as steel and would never have deserted a companion, whether she liked him or not. Now that Shasta knew he would have to spend the night alone, it was getting darker every minute. He began to like the look of the place less and less. There was something very uncomfortable about those great silent shapes of stone. He had been trying his hardest for a long time not to think of ghouls, but he couldn't keep it up any longer. "Ow, ow, help!" he shouted suddenly, for at that very moment he felt something touch his leg. I don't think anyone can be blamed for shouting if something comes up from behind and touches him, not in such a place and at such a time when he is frightened already. Shasta, at any rate, was too frightened to run. Anything would be better than being chased round and round the burial place of the ancient kings, while something he dared not look at behind him. Instead, he did what was really the most sensible thing he could do. He looked round, and his heart almost burst with relief. What had touched him was only a cat. Meow. The light was too bad now for Shasta to see much of the cat, except that it was big and very solemn. It looked as if it might have lived for long, long years among the tombs alone. Its eyes made you think it knew secrets it would not tell. "Puss, puss," said Shasta, "I suppose you're not a talking cat." Yes, I would be the first one to die in a horror movie, running and then falling, and yeah. The cat stared at him harder than ever. "Elizabeth Borison, hello. That's a new name. Welcome to story time." The cat stared at him harder than ever. Then it started walking away, and of course Shasta followed it. It led him right through the tombs and out on the desert side of them. There it sat down, bolt upright, with its tail curled round its feet and its face set toward the desert and toward Narnia and the north. And still, as if it were watching for some enemy, Shasta lay down beside it with his back against the cat and his face toward the tombs. Because if one is nervous, there's nothing like having your face toward the danger and having something warm and solid at your back. The sand wouldn't have seemed very comfortable to you, but Shasta had been sleeping on the ground for weeks and hardly noticed it. Very soon he fell asleep, though even in his dreams he went on wondering what had happened to Bree and Erebus and Win. He was wakened suddenly by a noise he had never heard before. Perhaps it was only a nightmare, said Shasta to himself. At the same moment he noticed that the cat had gone from his back, and he wished it hadn't. But he lay quite still without even opening his eyes because he felt sure he would be more frightened if he sat up and looked round at the tombs and the loneliness, just as you or I might lie still with bedclothes over our heads. But then the noise came again, a harsh, piercing cry from behind him out of the desert. Then, of course, he had to open his eyes and sit up. Calling a cat something warm behind you is a little bit crazy. The moon was shining brightly. The tombs, far bigger and nearer than he had thought they would be, looked gray in the moonlight. In fact, they looked horribly like huge people, draped in gray robes that covered their heads and faces. They were not at all nice things to have near you when spending a night alone in a strange place. But the noise had come from the opposite side, from the desert. Shasta had to turn his back on the tombs, and he didn't like that much. Candace, hello! And stare out across the level sand. The wild cry rang out again. I hope it's not more lions, thought Shasta. It was, in fact, not very like the lion's roars he had heard on the night when they met Win and Erebus, and was really the cry of a jackal. But of course, Shasta did not know this. Even if he had known, he would not have wanted very much to meet a jackal. The cries rang out again and again. There's more than one of them, whatever they are, thought Shasta, and they're coming nearer. I suppose that if he had been an entirely sensible boy, he would have gone back through the tombs, nearer to the river where there were houses, and wild beasts would be less likely to come. But then there were, or he thought there were, the ghouls. To go back through the tombs would mean going past those dark openings in the tombs, and what might come out of them? It may have been silly, but Shasta felt he had rather risk the wild beasts. Then, as the cries came nearer and nearer, he began to change his mind. He was just going to run for it when suddenly, between him and the desert, a huge animal bounded into view. As the moon was behind it, it looked quite black, and Shasta did not know what it was except that it had a very big, shaggy head and went on 4 legs. It did not seem to have noticed Shasta, for it suddenly stopped, turned its head toward the desert, and let out a roar which re-echoed through the tombs and seemed to shake the sand under Shasta's feet. The cries of the other creatures suddenly stopped, and he thought he could hear feet scampering away. Then the great beast turned to examine Shasta. It's a lion. I know it's a lion, thought Shasta. I'm done. I wonder, will it hurt much? I wish it was over. I wonder, does anything happen to people after they're dead? Oh, here it comes. And he shut his eyes and teeth tight. But instead of teeth and claws, he only felt something warm lying down at his feet. And when he opened his eyes, he said, Why, it's not nearly as big as I thought. It's only half the size. No, it isn't even a quarter the size. I do declare it's only the cat. I must have dreamed all that about it being as big as a horse. And whether he really had been dreaming or not, now what was lying at his feet was staring him out of his countenance with its big green unwinking eyes was the cat, though certainly one of the largest cats he had ever seen. "Oh, Cat," gasped Shasta, "I am so glad to see you again. I've been having such horrible dreams." And he at once lay down again, back to back with the cat, as they had at the beginning of the night. The warmth from it spread all over him. "I'll never do anything nasty to a cat again as long as I live," said Shasta, half to the cat and half to himself. "I did once, you know. I threw stones at a half-starved, mangy old stray." "Hey, stop that!" For the cat had turned round and given him a scratch. "None of that," said Shasta. "It isn't as if you could understand what I'm saying." Then he dozed off. Next morning when he woke, the cat was gone. The sun was already up and the sand hot. Shasta, very thirsty, sat up and rubbed his eyes. The desert was blindingly white, and though there was a murmur of noises from the city behind him, where he sat, everything was perfectly still. When he looked a little left and west so that the sun was not in his eyes, he could see the mountains on the far side of the desert, so sharp and clear that they looked only a stone's throw away. He particularly noticed one blue height that divided into two peaks at the top and decided that it must be Mount Pyre. "That's our direction, judging by what the raven said," he thought, "so I'll just make sure of it so as not to waste any time when the others show up." So he made a good, deep, straight furrow with his foot, pointing exactly to Mount Pyre. The next job clearly was to get something to eat and drink. Shasta trotted back through the tombs. They looked quite ordinary now, and he wondered how he could ever have been afraid of them. And down into the cultivated land by the river's side. There were a few people about, but not very many, for the city gates had been open several hours, and the early morning crowds had already gone in, so he had no difficulty in doing a little raiding, as Bree called it. It involved a climb over a garden wall, and the results were 3 oranges, a melon, a fig or two, and a pomegranate. After that, he went down to the river bank, but not too near the bridge, and had a drink. The water was so nice that he took off his hot, dirty clothes and had a dip. For of course, Shasta, having lived on the shore all his life, had learned to swim almost as soon as he had learned to walk. When he came out to lay on the grass looking across the water at Tashbaan, all the splendor and strength and glory of it, but that made him remember the dangers of it too. He suddenly realized that the others might have reached the tombs while he was bathing and gone on without me, as likely as not, so he dressed in a fright and tore back at such speed that he was all hot and thirsty when he arrived, and so the good of his bath was gone. Like most days when you're alone and waiting for something, this day seemed about 100 hours long. Don't hate on pomegranates. I like them. Though I didn't know that you're like most people like eat the whole seed. Like I always just kind of like crushed off the juice and then like spit the seeds out. But I don't know. Apparently you can eat the whole seed. I don't know. He had plenty to think of course, but sitting alone just thinking is pretty slow. He thought a good deal about the Narnians and especially about Corin. He wondered what had happened when they discovered the boy who had been lying on the sofa and hearing all their secret plans wasn't really Corin at all. It was very unpleasant to think of all those nice people imagining him a traitor. But as the sun slowly climbed up to the top of the sky and then slowly began going downward to the west, and no one came and nothing at all happened, he began to get more and more anxious. And of course, he now realized that when they arranged to wait for one another at the tombs, no one had said anything about how long. He couldn't wait here for the rest of his life. And soon it would be dark again, and he would have another night just like last night. A dozen different plans went through his head, all wretched ones, and at last he fixed on the worst plan of all. He decided to wait till it was dark and then go back to the river and steal as many melons as he could carry and set out for Mount Pyre alone, trusting for his direction to the line he had drawn that morning in the sand. It was a crazy idea, and if he had read as many books as you have about journeys over deserts, he would never have dreamed of it. But Shasta had read no books at all. I don't know what kind of melons they are. It just says melons. So I don't know. I mean, they're in like a desert area. So what kind of melons grow in the desert? I have no idea. Before the sun set, something did happen. Shasta was sitting in the shadow of one of the tombs when he looked up and saw 2 horses coming toward him. Then his heart gave a great leap, for he recognized them as Bree and Win. But the next moment, his heart went down into his toes again. There was no sign of Aravis. The horses were being led by a strange man, an armed man, pretty handsomely dressed like an upper slave in a great family. Bree and Win were no longer got up like pack horses, but saddled and bridled. And what could it all mean? It's a trap, thought Shasta. Somebody has caught Aravis, and perhaps they've tortured her, and she's given the whole thing away. They want me to jump out and run and speak to Bree, and then I'll be caught too. And yet, if I don't, I may be losing my only chance to meet the others. Oh, I do wish I knew what had happened. And he skulked behind the tomb, looking out every few minutes and wondering which was the least dangerous thing to do. And that's the end of chapters 5 and 6. I feel like it's like a show that always leaves you with a cliffhanger, because we just stop at 2 chapters and then you have to come back next week to find out what happens next. So enjoy your cliffhanger. Whatever happened to Aravis? What's going to happen to Shasta? It's just so exciting to wonder. So some quick shout outs. Eric DeLeon, Barbara Zena, Elizabeth Borison, Doc Michael, Candace C., Walter Williams, Sue Finelli. Scrolling. I think that's everyone. Kirk Wilson was here. Zulu One was here. Spicy Sarah was here. Anyone else who's here? Hello, and thank you for being here. Scrolling back to the bottom. Oh, let's see. I missed a few comments while I was scrolling around. Let me see. Don't leave. Let's talk. Let's see for a few minutes. Did I ever get that $30 to $35 plant that I wanted? So there was a rose bush that, yeah, one of them was $25, one of them was $30. I didn't want to spend that much on a single plant. Then they started looking terrible, and we marked them down. So when I didn't need one rose bush, I ended up with one that got marked down to $15. And then I ended up with 3 others that got marked down to $6. So I didn't need 1 rose, and now I have 4 rose bushes. And I got them all for about the same price that one was originally. So that was a very good score. I need to prune them back and fertilize them, and hopefully they'll have a second round of blooms. But yeah, I did get the unnecessary rose bushes, and they're wonderful. And let me see. Tell us about your meetup. What is the dates and where is it at? Yes, I'm having a meetup August 1st at Seahurst Park in Burien, Washington at, oh, message, not important. Seahurst Park in Burien, Washington at 1 p.m. It's on the waterfront with like little waves. You can see the mountains in the distance, which should be well below the supposed curvature of the earth. It's the beach that I have found, oh, getting the hiccups. It's the beach I found all of my sea glass at. It's a great place, so you can bring your kids, bring your family, bring your friends, bring stuff to barbecue, bring beach stuff so you can play on the beach. And yeah, so August 1st, Seahurst Park, Burien, Washington. Seed of David, hello. Oh, I missed one. I was just about to read it. Did I get the fan for my room? I do have a fan in here, but it's really loud, and so I don't have it on, and it's not currently as hot in here, so I'm not dying nearly as much. But yeah, I do have a fan, but yeah, it's cooled down quite a bit. Last week, it hit 115 degrees on Monday. It was absolutely miserable. Here in Washington, we're not used to that in any way, and so it was absolutely awful. And then the next day we woke up and it was 65 degrees, and now it's been about that since then. And so it's been really nice. If you don't want to water it for a few days, the price goes down to $8. Not even gonna lie, that is the tip and trick of why I got these plants marked down. It helps working in a garden center also, because you can just kind of like set those ones a little bit out of the way and let them get kind of ugly looking. And so yeah, got my super marked down roses. So I ended up with a Polynesian punch, which is really pretty pink and orange blooms. And I also ended up with a Plum Perfect Sunbelt, which has like darker purple, kind of lavender colored blooms on it. And then I ended up with, so those two roses I got them because they're so pretty. I had never seen roses that color. And then the other two that I got are called the Beverly Eleganza. And the reason I got those is because they smelled better than any other rose that we had. They were so unbelievably fragrant that they like made my mouth water kind of smelling them. They just smelled so good. And so yeah, those are the ones I ended up with, because I didn't want to get 3. So I ended up getting 2 of the Beverly Eleganza. So now if I decide to like grow them on something, I'll have 4, 2 on each side. Didn't want to have it be, be uneven if I was going to plant them somewhere, but they're still living in their buckets right now because I don't have a permanent home for them. But when I buy land, they will definitely be getting a permanent space. So then I'll have 2 very fragrant ones next to the 2 very pretty ones. So I will definitely have a nice big rose garden. Super excited. Oops, I keep like jumping. Not sure that part of the conversation. All my fans are in chat. Yeah. All 10 of you awesome people. It's great. maybe one day, I mean, I don't even care if I get like more people. I mean, it's just more people to talk to, because like obviously I would ban awful people, because quality is definitely where it's at over quantity. So yeah, I mean, I would rather have 10 people who are awesome than 1,000 people who are mediocre, or a million people who are just terrible. So I'm happy that you're all here and that you enjoy the story time. So Polynesian punch, that sounds like, are you sure that's not a drink? Yeah, it definitely sounds like something that you would get at a smoothie place. So the chat keeps just like jumping all the way to the bottom. Hey, buddy, do you want a Hawaiian punch? He's still has therapeutic beds over the years. That's hilarious. I've heard of people can like email IKEA. You download the like instructions for something from IKEA, and you just keep emailing them over like a 6-month time and be like, hey, I bought this and I'm missing this piece, and just keep doing that until they send you the whole thing. But I would imagine that at some point they'll be like, well, you have to send us your receipt to show that you bought it, because people are scammers. So I have a lot of marigolds and calendula. Calendula is amazing. You can put that in oil and then infuse the oil with the calendulas, and then you drain it out, and it's a super awesome just oil for your skin and your hair, and like you can use it as like a lotion, and yeah, it's awesome. We are the fucking best. Yeah, you know it. Where are my new kittens? Let me go see if they're awake, and I'll bring them in and show them to you. Just one sec. Okay. So this one is Jasper, and this one is, oh, she's hooked onto me. This one is Cruella. Cruella and Jasper. My babies, they're super tired. I'll be out in just a sec. It's going to take me an hour to go through the damn thing. But yes, those are my fur babies. They're so cute. Now that Dottie moved, I got a screenshot of what Flat Earth really looks like. Oh yeah, that's my my map of Narnia. So cool. It's like gigantic. It's like probably 5-6 feet across. Like, oof, it's awesome. Super loving it. I wish I could have like the screen back farther so that you could see the whole map behind me. But yeah, I'm loving that. Let me see. Yeah, those are my baby kittens. They're so cute. They're very, Cruella she definitely fits her name. She is a little shit, always into something, always into trouble. Jasper is going to be a fat, lazy house cat. He doesn't care at all. Like, he's so mellow, and Cruella is just always a little asshole. They are so fun. We're really glad that we got to, because they're always playing with each other and beating each other up, and just awesome. Yeah, they're so fun. Let's see. Can we get Grandma to come in and scare you again? Yeah. Luckily, my granny has learned to knock before coming in, as now you only get the one time that she scared me terribly. So I scare my son at least once, well, like in his time over here, like try to scare him at least once during that time. Sometimes I get him so good he falls over. That's also him being dramatic at sometimes, so it's really funny. But that's the best map I've ever seen. Here, let me get out of the way. I'll show you a little more of it. Yeah, it's a gigantic map. It's awesome. Narnia. It's hard for me to see because I'm not in the light. Let me see. What is that? Oh yeah, up right there. That's where the lamppost says lamppost, and right there's the wardrobe. Oh, up here. It's so hard to get the angle right. Witch's Castle. Witch's Camp. Aslan's Camp. Yeah, Cair Paravel on the water. Cair Paravel on the sea there. Yeah, it's awesome. No, got the angle all messed up. Okay, yeah. But yeah, super awesome map. Loving it. Found that on Amazon. Totally worth it. And when we read The Lord of the Rings, there's one of Middle Earth as well. So I'll be getting that. I had brother and sister cats just like that, with the lazy brother and the wild cat sister. Yeah, Cruella is literally insane. If she's awake, she is getting into shit and talking Jasper into getting into shit with her, and like constantly picking them both up. And I'm just like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you there? Like, oh my gosh, they drive me crazy, but they're so cute. And my son is 9. Yeah. He'll be 10 in January, and I refuse to admit it. That's the original Tartaria. Exactly. You're the kind of person that goes to science fiction movies with the full kit and wardrobe of the time period, right? If I went places, yes, I absolutely would. I used to act in high school, so I love costumes and dressing up and just fun stuff like that. And Barbara, I think you asked earlier if I'm on the Beartaria Times app, and yes, I am on there. My name on there is Retarded Bear, because that's my bear name. And yeah, I share all kinds of stuff on there. I love Beartaria Times because it actually makes me post much more wholesome stuff. So people message me all the time. They're like, oh, I love your page. It's so inspiring and uplifting and nice. And I'm like, okay, well, definitely don't look at my Instagram or my Facebook, because that is where I shitpost all kinds of stuff. Like, I'm in the singles group on Facebook right now, and people are like, oh, can I message you? Can I friend request you? I'm like, I mean, sure, but like, if you message me and you're interested in dating me, I'm going to tell you that the earth is not a spinning ball. And I swear to you, that is the biggest deterrent of people not wanting to date me and continue talking to me. Been ghosted a few times for that. People lose interest very quickly when I like try to ease them in, warn them like, hey, don't get mad if you friend me on Facebook and you see me shit posting my conspiracy stuff, because I will. And yeah, and so I try to like ease them into it, and they're like, oh, I'm down with conspiracies, that's fine. And I'm like, yeah, well, what do you know about flat Earth? What do you think about the moon landing? What do you know about Tartaria? Like, how deep in the rabbit hole are you? Like, because it's about to get real up in here. um, yeah, I love maps too, Sue. And yeah, this one, it just makes me very happy. Very happy. It's an awesome map. The goodness of Bertaria. Yeah, Bertaria is just awesome. It's really, really great. Dottie is beyond famous now. The smile on the map, total package. You're so nice. And yes, I am very weirdly famous from calling into Strange World so much, and now selling my, I don't have any in here, of course. Selling my Wonder Domes, my flat Earth paperweights that I make. So yeah, I am very famous in weird ways. So it's interesting, but they just deer in headlights. Yeah, exactly. They're like, yeah, I'm down for conspiracies. What do you know about flat Earth? And they're like, can I back out of this DM? Because I do not want to be here. It's funny. Good times. Good times and rock and roll or something. I have no idea. Fast times at Ridgemont High. I don't know. I do not know like catchphrases, whatever. Just make them up myself. But anyway, I am gonna get out of here because I want to go and work out before I have to go to bed. Oh, and Zulu One, you did fall asleep. I knew it. I knew you did. Can always call it when Zulu One falls asleep, because he's here at the beginning to say hello, and then suddenly he doesn't exist in Narnia anymore. But you can always go back and listen to it from the beginning. Give you your shout outs, of course. Devin Full, how many Rogans are your green beans? Not growing green beans, but my tomatoes are at least 4 feet tall. So that's like what, 13, 14 Rogans tall? Something like that. So yeah, my tomatoes are at least 4 feet taller than, or at least 3.5 feet taller than Joe Rogan. So pretty impressive for a tomato. So anyway, it's been fun as always. I'm gonna get out of here so I can go do some Zumba and yeah, get my dance on before I go to bed. But I thank you all for being here. This has been Storytime with Dottie. I'll see you next week, Wednesday at 8 p.m. Much love. See y'all on the flat side.